So, Tom, as we shift gears, we're going to talk a little bit about food, health, sleep, and relationships. So, when we talk about the first idea of health, of course, because health tends to go with happiness, and happiness tends to go with health, because when we are unhealthy or unwell in some way, it debilitates in so many different ways our quality of life and what we can or cannot do or be, etc. When we speak about health, of course, today in our society we see chronic diseases just at probably unprecedented levels in our human family, whether it's cancer, diabetes type 2, heart disease, all the different autoimmune diseases, just even chronic infections. How do you see what is happening, or is it also some reflection on a level where we inside of us, are not well and we're projecting it as an outside way? But again, how does it fit into the idea of a virtual reality and the system evolving itself? Where is all the sickness really coming from at the root level?
We can look at several levels of where it's coming from. One, of course, is that the consciousness level. Mm-hmm. Okay, often illness is a result of our stress, our unhappiness, and why are we unhappy, and why do we have stress, and why are we angry, and why are we, well, it's because of our fear, it's because of our beliefs, it's because of our arrogance, our ego. Those are the reasons that create all of the stress. And a consciousness system does reflect itself. The way our bodies are is a reflection of the way our consciousness is. Okay, a troubled consciousness creates a troubled body. The consciousness leads, the body follows. Mm-hmm. It's not the other way around. The body is really a virtual body. It's a product of consciousness. Consciousness is not a product of the body. Consciousness isn't something that's generated in a brain. Okay, consciousness is the main thing. The physical system is a secondary virtual thing. So consciousness leads, the body follows. If the consciousness is sick, the body's sick too. So that's at one level. Mm-hmm. The sickness, and particularly the things that are just general degenerative diseases, as opposed to a broken arm or something that's mm-hmm. very specific. Just these degenerative diseases have a lot to do with degenerative consciousness. Okay, so there is a connection there. And we, of course, are the same degenerate consciousness that brings us war and brings us politics and brings us, this money system we don't like and all the rest of the things we're talking about that are, so terrible. Well, that's a part of us, our consciousness, again. The other side of that is that we have this rule here in the physical reality. It's the physics, it's the biology, it's the science by which our virtual reality works. I mean, every virtual reality has rules. If you play Sims, then there are rules. Like my daughter, when she was young, she'd have a little house and a swimming pool, and then sometimes just for fun, she'd put the kids in the swimming pool, pull up the ladders, and they couldn't get out. Okay, because that was a rule. If there's no ladder, then you can't get out of the pool. You can only stay in a pool but so long before you get too tired and you sink. So if you pull the ladders out after you've put the kids in, they'll all drown. You see, that's just the way it will work, because that's the way the rule set works. Well, every game has its rule sets. In the Sims, you can't walk through walls, you have to walk through doors, and so on. Well, we have rules and rule sets here. It's called our science, and we have to deal with them. And one of our, some of our rules are the rules that specify our biology. Okay, now we have unprecedented amounts of degenerative disease, and we have absolutely horrible nutrition. As a society. Right. We are overfed and undernourished. Okay, and the way it works is that because the food we eat is so nutrition poor, our body that needs certain raw materials, and this is the rule set, certain raw materials to function, to make things, to make the biochemicals it needs to function in the body, mm-hmm. it's not getting the raw materials it needs because they're so nutrition poor. So your body's saying, feed me, I need raw materials, give me more. And what you get more of is trash food with no nutrients in it, but full of calories. Right. Well, then the body's saying, well, I still don't have the things I need, feed me. So you eat more junk food full of calories that still's not giving your body what it needs. And the body says, feed me. Well, what happens? You end up obese, right? You end up huge because your body keeps wanting to be fed because it needs things. and you keep giving it garbage and high-calorie junk that just goes to fat, goes to fat. Now you weigh 400 pounds, your knees are bad, your feet are bad, your legs are bad. It's just, your life is unpleasant.
Right.
Your health is your lifespan just dropped 15 years because you're heavy, and you have all of these problems that you create. Okay, well, that's an extreme case. Everybody isn't obese, everybody isn't heavy, but it's the same thing that has to do with the health of your heart or the health of your pancreas, and your blood sugar and that sort of thing. It works the same way. If you continue to feed, to feed your system non-nutritious, you put garbage, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? You put the garbage in, and what you expect out is a healthy body that's fit, and trim and ready to go. No, it doesn't work that way. So here we have this food system, if you will, that's developed consumer likes and dislikes, and it has people basically eating a horrible diet. We are probably nutritionally about like those poor Biafrans we saw in the news, 20 years ago with the little skinny children at the potbellies who were, malnourished. That's what we're doing to ourselves, except, we're big.
Yes,
and
the opposite direction.
in the opposite direction. It's the same thing. We have terrible health, and it's because of what we eat. Well, what should we be eating? You should be eating pretty much the same things that were there to eat when our physical system evolved to be the way it is. See, it evolved according to the rule set. So here we are. We've evolved over, a couple of, a million years or something. We've evolved these systems, and we need to feed them pretty much in the way that the body evolved to deal with, the food, because that's just the way it is. So in any case, what does that mean? Well, what did the ancient people, critters, monkeys, all the way down our chain, what did they eat? They ate leaves, they ate roots, they ate seeds. Well, what is that? How do we change those words now? When we say roots, we mean carrots, potatoes, onions, things like that. Leaves, what does that mean? Oh, kale, spinach, collard greens, bok choy, lettuce, all those kinds of things. And they ate fruit. That's another thing that they ate. They ate ripe fruit. So if we primarily eat those things, and the seeds. What's the seeds? Well, seeds, of course, are nuts. Nuts are seeds. But besides that, all the grains are seeds, right? All your flour, all your rice, all that stuff is all just seeds. So if you limit your diet to the high nutrition leaves, roots, fruit and seeds, then you will have good nutrition. So what does that mean? What's the high nutrition? The high nutritional part of that group is green leaves. The green leaves carry the most nutrition per calorie, you see, than any of the rest. Okay, and then after that you probably have fruit, because fruit has a lot of nutrition in it, but it also has a lot of calorie in it. Okay, so the best nutrition to calorie ratio is the green leaves. But then you have fruit, and you have beans, and you have onions, and you have mushrooms. You have all those sorts of things, and they're fine. But now, what about the grains? Well, grains are okay if they're whole. If you get the whole grain, but you don't have as high a nutrition to calorie ratio because grains are carbohydrates. Carbohydrates turn into sugars in your system once your system digests them. That's what carbohydrates are. That's the sugar family. You want to then eat fewer there. So what does your meal look like? Mostly green leaves, some fruit, some nuts, berries, those kinds of things, of course, but not so many of those nuts and seeds that you end up with high calorie, you see? So mostly green leaves, fruit, fresh fruit, and yes, onions, yes, mushrooms, yes, all that kind of stuff, beans of all sorts. Those are all good, all the legumes, because they have a high nutrition to calorie ratio. And take it easy on the grain. Take it easy on the pasta. Take it easy on the bread. Take it easy on all the rice, all of the carbohydrates. Take it easy on the potatoes, for the same reason. And if you have that diet, don't eat fruit, don't drink fruit juice, eat the fruit. You see, now it's not that I'm saying fruit juice is bad. It's just that it's better if you eat the fruit, because then you get the whole thing and eat the whole fruit. So that's the idea. Now, if we ate like that, most of these degenerative diseases would just disappear.
Exactly.
Those diseases are there primarily because of what we do to our bodies, and that we don't feed them the kind of things that they need to operate properly. And okay, our bodies are very adaptable, and they get by, and they get by, and they get by. But after 20 or 30 or 40 years of getting by, they just start to fail. They just can't get by anymore. It's like you've squeezed an awful lot out of them already just to live on junk. If for 40 years you've been eating garbage, and your body just isn't going to work very well. Think of the poor guy, 20 years ago, who was it? Red Skelton did a hobo comedy routine. Anyway, the guy lived in the dump. Think of the guy that did actually live in a dump and did eat garbage, right? And nobody expected him to live very long, do we? He got all kinds of diseases and illnesses for people who scavenge like that and live off of, trash piles. Well, we don't do it because we're economically deprived. We do it because we're economically advantaged.
Yeah.
We limit ourselves to eating off of a trash pile rather than eating nutritious food. I mean, how many people here today mainly ate green leaves for their food? Almost no one.
Exactly.
We don't do that. That's what monkeys do. They eat bananas and, pluck leaves out of trees, right? We don't do that anymore. We have Twinkies and other things that taste better. Again, it's back to I make my choices because it feels good. Well, why do these things feel good? You get addicted to them.
Yeah.
Sugar is addictive. The grease, the oil, it's
salt,
addictive.
Yeah.
The salt, the stuff's addictive. That's why it feels good. And that's why it tastes good, because you've learned that it tastes good. Taste is a learned thing. It's not that we're born with taste buds that like Twinkies. We're not born with taste buds that like Twinkies. We educate our taste buds to like Twinkies, to like sweet and grease. You see, it's not natural. It's not like, well, that sweet grease just tastes good. Period. It does. That's not true. It tastes good to us because we've been acculturated to that as comfort food, so it tastes good to us. But that's a learned behavior. That's not we're not the hostage of our taste buds. We've learned to make that interpretation, and we can unlearn it just as easily, to where if we taste something that's sweet and oily, we go, oh, yuck, that's sweet, how awful. We just have a different attitude toward it. It's all up here. We create all of that, what tastes good and what doesn't. I mean, go look at all the different cultures and all the different kinds of food. There are people over in China eating grasshoppers and things, and we look at it and go, ooh, gross. But they do it not because they're trying to show off about doing something gross, right? They do it because that's part of their culture, and it's fine, and it tastes good. Well, we probably wouldn't like the taste, but taste buds don't come with attitudes. We come with attitudes,
yes,
you see, and we program then those taste buds with our attitudes. So why is it that we eat all this stuff? We're addicted to it.
Yeah.
We're addicted to it because it tastes good. Why does it taste good? Because we've convinced ourselves that it does. Because when we were 1 year old, somebody sat us in a high chair, shoved a cupcake in our face, and full of sugar on top. And eventually we become sugar addicts.
That's right.
And that's why it tastes good. So why is our culture so full of this degenerative disease? Well, partly it's because our intent, our consciousness is not really very healthy either. It's full of fear. It's full of anxiety. It's full of expectations, needs, wants, desires. There's all that stuff in it. And the second reason is that when it comes to abiding by the rule set of this virtual reality we live in, we just fly right in the face of all common sense, take our great wealth that we have in Western culture, and go eat in a garbage dump. Restrict ourselves just to the stuff that is nutritionally inadequate.
Yes.
And the stuff that's adequate, the green leaves, well, okay, I'll take a little salad, maybe with my steak and potatoes and, piece of cake afterwards. But the green leaves are almost like a little color on the plate. It's not, it's not really what people eat. They don't eat the stuff that they need to, that their bodies need. So that's the problem with the eating and the food choices and the bad health. Again, here we are shooting ourselves in the foot with one hand and then complaining about it afterwards. Say, oh, my foot really hurts, and then we reach down and go, pow, shoot it again. Oh, no. Damn gun, damn foot. We say everything, but damn us, for being so stupid as to shoot ourselves in the foot.
Of course.
And that's just the way we are. We always find somebody else to blame.
Yes.
That's an ego. That's what the ego will do for us. It will find somebody else to blame. It's the farmers. It's the marketeers. It's the people who make Twinkies. It's this. It's that. It's everybody but us.
Yeah.
We're not to blame. We're innocent. You see, we're just innocent victims. And that's the wrong attitude. If you don't want to feel bad, if you don't want to have these degenerative disease problems when you get older, then you need to take care of your body and you need to make better decisions. And at first, it won't feel good because you already have programmed your feel-good responses for Twinkies, not for spinach. And so you just have to get over that until you retrain your taste buds and your attitudes, and then it does feel good. Then you sit down to a green smoothie, you see, that's nothing but ground up greens and fruit, and it's delicious. It tastes really, really good. And the idea of a Twinkie or a cookie or even bread with sugar in it is like repulsive.
Exactly.
I wouldn't want that stuff, you see. So then you live a totally different life and you're happy. You enjoy what you eat. Eating is still fun, but you've eliminated the animal products. You've eliminated, the toxins. You try to buy organic and it works really good for you. So that's the thing. Again, it's us is the problem. Yeah. It's not the bad
outside
mega farmers that are out there, trying to, put all these preservatives and they do this to the food and that to the food and the GMO. They're really, again, not the problem. We make them out to be the problem because we need a scapegoat to find the problem somewhere other than in our own skull. But that's where the problem is. The problem is home, here with us, and all the rest of that stuff is our excuse to blame somebody else for our own inability to take responsibility for ourselves and the choices that we make. So that's not good news. A lot of people are going to be squirming in their chairs, but that's just the way it is.
But Tom, it's, and this is obviously my personal bias because I am an optimal nutrition advocate, but if people who are listening, watching, or know your work and are fans of MBT or the virtual reality or, everything that your work encompasses, if they just took and seriously made an effort to apply just this one aspect, I mean, this alone would change so much in people's lives because, again, the power of our health is huge on the choices, decisions we're going to make, how we're going to live our life, etc. So I thank you so much for saying this. It's like, music, at least to my ears. Now, you've also mentioned so many important points like fruits, which I find today more and more people are afraid to eat, which just boggles my mind that they're not afraid to eat processed stuff, but they're afraid to eat fruit when this is, again, one of nature's most ideal foods in for our human body. Now, the other big aspect is, of course, when I look at what is happening in the field of nutrition today, yes, we do still have the most of the people eating a very processed fast food diet, but then we also have these two arms, and those two arms would be the idea of, again, just plant eating, or some would call themselves either vegetarians, vegans, or plant-based eaters. And then we've got the other arm, which is something that you sort of mentioned minus one thing, and that is the primal eaters, or the caveman diet as they call it, that they're following, where they do go back to the natural way, kind of renounce all processed food, even including dairy and such, but they feel that it's like the body's birthright to include meat, or specifically any meat, and I include fish in that as well. I love the fact that so many people are moving into the more natural way of eating, but when we look at this moving towards love, towards lower entropy, the belief that so many people have that they either can't sustain themselves without animal products or that animals are here for us to just do whatever we want, that still governs so many people. Can you speak a little bit about that in terms of, again, moving towards lowest entropy and love while we nourish our bodies?
Sure. It's not all just, rule set and health issues here. There are moral issues here as well when it comes to food, and particularly when it comes to eating meat. moral issue is, do you find it moral to kill something when you really don't need to kill something basically for your enjoyment? Does killing for pleasure, you see, is that a moral problem? Now when I look at it, I say yes. Killing for pleasure is a moral problem. Killing to stay alive, we go back 200 or 300 years where people, lived off the land, and they would trap rabbits or do whatever, and they would eat them. That's different. They were killing to sustain themselves. They were doing what they needed to do to sustain themselves in that environment. Maybe they were nomads moving from here to there. They didn't have farms, you see. They had to just live on what they could find. Well, meat was one of the things they could find, so they ate it. So do tigers and bears, right? They eat meat. And some bears do. A lot of bears don't. But, anyway, tigers eat meat. So they eat meat because that's what they need to eat. That's their niche in the big evolutionary plan, of things. They have evolved to do what they do, and they're part of the ecology for doing that. If they didn't eat meat, then you'd be overrun with deer or something else, you see. So they're all part of a design plan. Well, people aren't exactly part of a design plan. We go out and kill in ways and in a, what can we say, like, in a volume and with such a vengeance that it's not just our niche in the environment to do this. We create the environment.
Right.
We don't just live in it. We mold it to be the way we want it. So we're kind of taking the role of creator here in our environment. And when you take that role of creator, you need to take some responsibility along with that role. Otherwise, you're not really the creator, you're more the rapist. You're more the just taking what you want and not really giving a damn about, who it hurts or what it does to anybody else. That's different. If you're going to be the creator of our environment because we've got the brain and the tools allow us to do it, then we also have to take the responsibility for being that creator, and I don't see that. We still are kind of stuck into the set that anything that we can force to be the way we want it, that's okay, because we're the big monkey, and we can force the other animals to do what we want because we have the tractors and the plows and the transportation and the guns and whatever, the fences to make it be the way we want it. So we force the ecology rather than, we're not just creating, we're forcing it into modes to support our own desires.
Yes.
Okay, now if it was to support our survival, okay, we have the right to do that just like the tiger. But it doesn't have anything to do with survival. And in fact, it's counterproductive to our survival because most of the meat we eat isn't healthy for us to eat anyway.
Exactly.
And not just because of all the processing that goes into it, but animal protein is not really any of those things I mentioned on, that are primary high nutrition to calorie, items. They don't come up they don't fare very well when you make your list of good things to eat.
That's right.
They're down on the bottom of the list somewhere, along with things like cheese. Oh my, wonderful cheese. It tastes so good, but it's basically just fat.
Exactly.
You're eating fat. So you have this real high calorie thing with just a tiny little bit of nutrition. All right, it's got a few things in it that, are good for your body, but you get this tiny little bit of nutrition and this big downside of all these calories. Well, that's not, what makes a food good. A food is good when it has all this nutrition and just a little bit of calories. That makes it a really good food. So meat falls off the scale, basically, as far as a good food to eat. It's not. And same with dairy. Same with eggs. So all the animal products don't really fall into a good food to eat category. That's, that's a good reason by itself not to eat, those things.
Yeah.
Secondly, the moral issues, what we do with the chickens, what we do with the cattle, how we treat the animals that we farm, they no longer are, go back 100 years or so and you had small farms. You didn't have big agribusiness.
Yeah.
And on these small farms, yes, they raised and ate animals, but those animals were I don't know, it was a lot different environment that those animals lived in. The animals were not abused before you ate them, you know. So we now have this moral thing going on top of it. Not only do we kill for our pleasure, but we abuse and torture the things first before we kill them for our pleasure. Now we're starting to sound kind of twisted, right? This not only a moral issue, but it's gotten to the point that it sounded kind of sick. What do you mean? You torture things before, you know, before you kill them, you know, for your pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't, you know, you put it in that light, doesn't sound too good, does it? We sound like we're pretty, you know, low here in our moral choices. So it's a moral issue, and some of that, of course, could be cleaned up just in treating animals better, respecting them as sentient entities that they are. They're conscious animals just like we are, doing the same thing we're doing. They're evolving. They have their own choices to make and things to do, and we kind of butt into that and mess all that ecology up, and we take no responsibility for it, and we do it because it feels good. You see, we need to take responsibility here too. So the animal products fail on health just because they don't have a lot of nutrients per calorie.
Right.
Some people will say, well, you have to eat meat to get protein. That's just another story that the meat industry, you know, and the dairy industry would ever put out for your consumption, so you'll give them your money and buy their products. You've got more protein, you know, in a vegan diet than you can use.
Yes.
I mean, look at it this way. Where did that steer, where did that cow, that buffalo, that elephant get all those big muscles? Look at the animals that have really big muscles. They didn't get it from eating meat. All those big muscles came from eating grass, right? So if you look at all your big muscle creatures, they all got those big muscles from eating grass. And here we sit and we say, well, you know, I need to eat meat for protein so I can have muscles. You know, otherwise I won't be able to build any muscle if I don't have any protein. Well, go tell that to the 800-pound steer, you know, that has all that muscle that we call meat, and they got all of it by eating grass. There's plenty of protein in a vegan diet. Plenty of protein in a vegan diet. And you don't need to drink milk to get calcium. You get much, much more calcium in a chunk of broccoli than you do in a glass of milk. And you don't get the sugar, and you don't get the fat.
Exactly.
See? And milk, I grew up on this slogan that said, milk is nature's most perfect food. Well, you know, that's as bogus as it gets. It's true, but it's true only on one condition. It is nature's most perfect food for a calf.
Yes.
But if you're not a calf, then it's not nature's most perfect food. It's got way too much sodium to potassium in it, and it does not help babies or young people generate healthy central nervous systems.
Yes.
So you end up with children raised on milk, cow's milk, that now have inferior central nervous systems than they would have had if they didn't have the cow's milk, because their system is being fed like a calf.
Yes.
Well, what's calf? Grow big, strong muscles, dim wits, right? That's what happens. So the central nervous system that has to do with your thinking and your cognitive abilities, that gets short shrift. That basically gets retarded, if you will, because you're not feeding it the right kind of minerals and things that it needs to differentiate all of those nerve fibers and brain tissue that you have that a calf never develops, you see? So it's not nature's most perfect food by a long shot. It's only perfect food for a calf. And it probably is nature's most perfect food for a calf. But these are all marketing things, you know. The department, the Federal Department of Meat and Dairy, you know, has convinced us that these are necessary, important foods.
Yes.
You know, and we swallow it hook, line, and sinker, and look who runs those departments. You know, it's the dairy industry, it's the meat industry. Well, of course, that's what they're saying. You know, that's how they've grown wealthy, is on the fact that Americans feel they have to have, and probably Europeans in general, that they, you know, if you don't eat meat, then
there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, you know, that's that's the way third world people are. You know, the people that grow up in Central Africa don't get to eat meat. You know, they have to eat sweet potatoes and rice or something. So the people who kind of have it and are wealthy and can have their choice, Well, meat's the choice. That's the obvious thing. It becomes a status. You eat meat just because that means you're powerful. You get to kill things and, and eat them. So it's not healthy for us. It's not moral in many cases. And I don't mean it's always immoral. There are those who have free-range chickens and who do this and that, and they're not mass-producing, and they don't torture their animals before they butcher them. They, they're more responsible than that. And it all boils down, it's in general, if you don't have to kill something to get by, don't.
Yeah.
There's, it's another living entity that wants its life and to live it and has things to do with that life. So that's the idea. So I would say that, all the animal products basically fail for two reasons. One is nutrition. They're not in the high foods. They're not terrible foods. It's not like you eat meat, it's poison. No, I mean meat that maybe you caught out in the woods or something, meat that's not processed. It's not necessarily that it's terrible for you. It just, compared to other foods, it doesn't make the top 100. It doesn't get into the part that's really good for you.
Yes.
And some will say, if you don't eat meat, you can't get, B12 in any other way. It's only found in meat. Well, that's nonsense.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things that you have in your body that you need that you don't eat. How much adrenaline do you eat? How much insulin do you eat? How much your body makes these things. You don't have to eat everything that the body uses. It doesn't have to come in through your mouth. The body is a marvelous chemical factory that takes raw ingredients and produces the things the body needs. There are lots of vegans out there who never touch an animal product, and they're not all suffering from B12 deficiency. Mm-hmm. Actually, if they eat reasonably well as vegans and don't eat mainly pasta and lower quality food like that, none of them are suffering from B12 deficiency. Well, how's that possible? They don't eat any B12. Well, they make all of it they need. Mm-hmm. It's not necessary. So much stuff. I mean, all your hormones, all of the stuff that regulates your body, all of these biochemicals, you don't need any of those. They're all made. So that's another hocus pocus, trying to thing that meat is absolutely necessary. You can avoid the moral issue by eating roadkill. If it's already dead, go ahead, have at it. Which means if your significant other has meat on their plate and they don't want to eat it and it's already been ordered and they hand it to you, well, now you've avoided the moral issue because you're not contributing to its being killed. It's already been done. So you can still eat meat and kind of escape the moral thing, but it's still not healthy for you. It's still not a good thing to do.
Yeah. Well, Tom, this is again more brilliant, really, information and stuff that, again, we need to start applying to our everyday life, not just theorizing about these wonderful concepts. And I know that a lot of people get so excited about, like you even mentioned the example of whether it's seeing auras today or, balancing their chakras or going out of body. But this is the real stuff that we have to contend with while we're in this reality. And so I really, really appreciate you sharing all this. Now, one last part when it comes to eating, perhaps you can shed light on this from your personal experience to other realities. But as well, I know that on our planet today, we do have people who, because everything that we've just been talking about really comes down to, as you've already been pointing out, beliefs and fear. The belief that we have about this food and the fear that if we don't get it, of course, something bad will happen. But we do have people today on this planet who are, for example, just surviving off of breath or surviving off of the energy of the sun, like solar gazing and such. And, is this something, too, that we are perhaps moving towards on some level as we lower our entropy? Is this also your experience from other realities or dimensions where other beings perhaps don't use any physical sustenance?
Yeah, this is an interesting phenomena, and it can be done. It's a real phenomena. It's not just a bunch of hokey people out there making stuff up, trying to, get the gullible people to believe that they can get by without eating. It's real. Right. It does happen. It is possible to do that. And the reason is that this is a virtual reality. These are virtual bodies. Okay? This is not the physical. The physical is not the fundamental thing. It's just information. So in a simulation like this, all kinds of things can happen. Okay? Yes, we have a rule set, but then you can kind of modify the rules. You can get around the rules. There's lots of other ways to, as an example of getting around the rule set, I always give is that when my son was young, he was probably 13 or 14. He played a game called Age of Empires. It was a Microsoft game, and in it you start like at cavemen and work your way up through the civilizations. And one day when he was playing that, he was behind. All the other people were beating him, and he was down to almost nothing. And he says, "Hey, Dad, watch this." So he did a couple of things on the keyboard, and suddenly in his little camp, he had a Mercedes-Benz with a nuclear rocket launcher in the back of it. So within 5 minutes, he had destroyed all of his competitors and was, the winner of the game. And I said, "Well, how did you do that?" And he says, "A cheat." He says, "I just learned about this cheat you could do." Well, those are the kinds of things you can do in a simulation, in a digital reality based on information. So when we say, just on breathing, they don't eat, that's impossible. You say, well, is it impossible that suddenly, as a caveman, you get a Mercedes-Benz with a nuclear rocket launcher in it? No, it's not impossible, actually. In this kind of a reality that's based on information and data, as ours is, anything is possible.
Yes.
A lot of it isn't likely, but it's possible. Now, how possible, okay, it's possible, but how likely is it? Well, it's probably not going to be very likely that it'll ever turn out to have what they call them, breatharians, dominate in our culture. Our culture isn't ready for that yet. We haven't grown up to that point where we will support that yet. So it's going to remain off in the margins where there's plenty of plausible deniability that it even exists because we're not really ready for it to come, out of those shadows. It's just going to be what it is. But it is possible that one day that might dominate if we grew up that much. But, again, what we're talking about, look at where we live. Look at our neighborhood. We're not anywhere near having that. I mean, we can't even be nice to each other or civil, much less, reach a state where we can get by the rule set and not have to eat any kind of solid foods at all. But it is possible, and that's why. It's possible because this is a virtual reality. And you can hack the system if you like. And that's the same thing with the paranormal things. You can see yours. You can move around and explore the larger reality in out-of-body state. You can remote view. You can have telepathic communications. All these things are possible. And just like the breatharian, you just have to grow up to where they're on your path for development, and it becomes a reality. You can do that, you see. But until you grow up, then you're not ready.
Yeah.
We're not ready to go there. So there are those things. Yes, I have been to many other physical environments, physical reality frames. Mostly, they're just like this one. They eat their environment. We eat our environment, whether it's green leaves or critters. We eat our environment. Mostly they do too. They eat their environment. But as you get to those reality frames where the rule set isn't quite so constricting, people don't eat at all. There is no eating going on. Now we look at those people, say, well, what do you mean people? People don't eat. Well, entities like us. What are they? Consciousness, just like us. But they live in an environment where the rule set is very unconstraining. If you go to less constrained virtual realities, the dream reality, that's a less constrained virtual reality. Okay, people don't eat in the dream reality. I mean, you might sit down to a meal in your dream, but entities that live in that sort of a reality have no need to eat because we're just consciousness. They're not in a rule set that has evolved to where eating isn't part of that, that evolved process. Okay, now we can evolve beyond that. See, evolution it's not a done thing. It's another thing. People say, well, when do we get to the end of this? When are we as evolved as we're going to get and we're done? You don't get there. Evolution is an open-ended process. It's never done. You see, are we done evolving now? Is that it? We're just, we were monkeys, 10 million years ago, and now, we got off all the hair, and, our arms are shorter, and et cetera, et cetera. Does that quit? because we're here and now we're at the pinnacle, and it's open-ended. It's a process that keeps on going. So, as we evolve as a people and as a society, things will change. And some of these things that are now out in the margins will move more into the center, but not until we're ready and not until we've evolved. It's not like you're going to go out and say, all right, guys, this breatharian thing is true. And, here's some people, we'll lock them in a room for a year, and see if they die of hunger. And if they don't, then you agree that, you'll do everything I say. It's not like that. It's not going to be that way. You can't get people to do this out in front of their own evolution as consciousness.
That's right.
They have to evolve first. So it's not that doing without food is going to sweep the globe and is going to solve world hunger. Mm-hmm. We got a long way to go. By the time we get to the point where we're ready for that step, there won't be any more world hunger. We will have solved that long before, you see. Mm-hmm. So we will have served that because of our kindness and caring for each other.
Yeah.
Long before we get to the point that we're ready to do without food. So it's kind of it's not really a solution mm-hmm. to our problem in the sense that we take it and change the way we are now with it. That's mm-hmm. not it. It's not that kind of thing, but it is an example of where we can go,
right?
And how we can evolve. It's a possibility that we can move in that direction. In which case, mm-hmm. we just kind of change the nature of the game here. It becomes a different sort of place. Mm-hmm. So yes, there are other places that don't eat. A lot of them. Mostly they're not as constrained as this place. Most physical kind of places, not like the dream reality, but realities that mm-hmm. are very much like this physical reality, they eat their environment as well. It's just the way they are. Mm-hmm. It's normal. We're not doing anything that's particularly abnormal there, but
right. And it is just, as you said, it's an evolutionary process, a journey
right.
of looking at, again, the health aspect of ourselves, our planet, and the moral aspect of the animals. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, with respect to health, one other big factor is, of course, sleep. But sleep is also something fascinating where you also talk a lot about when it comes to out-of-body experiences or lucid dreaming or virtual realities, experiencing them, etc. So what is your take on the amount of sleep? Because some people, like for myself, I just feel fantastic when I sleep 8 to 10 hours. For some people, and of course in our productivity world, they say, no, 6 hours. Some even push for 4 hours. But is it possible that maybe sleep helps us process the density of this reality? Because that's, again, from my experience, what I'm finding.
Yes. So the idea that you should push the amount of sleep you need to smaller and smaller numbers because it allows you to get more done mm-hmm. is a very foolish idea. That's not a good idea. What we have a reason for sleeping. There's two fundamental reasons for sleeping. One is that it allows you physically to catch up. Mm-hmm. Think of your body as a big chemical factory, okay, and it's constantly using energy and getting byproducts. Okay, so it's feeding food and it's getting garbage. Right, that's just the way things work. You put stuff in your car, and your car burns the gas, but it also outputs soot and carbon monoxide. Mm-hmm. So there's always things in and things out in the process. Well, the things out are generally the garbage that needs to be cleaned up. Well, all day long you're running this machine, and you're making garbage at a much faster rate than you can clean it up. So partly you sleep because it gives your body a chance for the garbage collectors to go out and clean up everything before you start another day. And your byproducts of metabolism, start to foul the system again. So that's one reason for sleep. It gives the physical body a chance to catch up, and that's part of the rule set. Okay, that's just an evolved rule set here. Mm-hmm. So the second big reason is that you need that environment, that dream environment, is part of your. It's part of your curriculum. You're enrolled in this evolutionary. Consciousness evolution program to where you're trying to evolve your quality of consciousness. And in that program, you get, Earth 101, right? And you get Dreams 101. You have to take both of those. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is that this is your job as growing up. This is what you're supposed to do. You don't get any holidays. You don't get any breaks. You do this all the time, 24/7. That's what you do. You make choices, and from those choices, you either evolve or de-evolve the quality of your conscious. So you work all day, making choices at the workplace and at home and everything else. Then you go to bed, you start dreaming, and you work all night, making choices in those dreams and doing similar things. But the things that you can do in those dreams are very different than the things that you can do here. You see? So we have this highly structured schoolhouse where we have all this neat feedback coming, and where we have all of these long causal chains that give us feedback for how we're doing, and look at our world around us. Well, this is how we're doing, you see. So we have all of this stuff that feeds back to us, and then you have in a dream reality where things can change on a dime. You can fly, you can do all this. Three-headed monsters pop up and go boo, and you have to deal with that fear. That's a different kind of place, and it gives you a whole different set and ways of approaching learning. But it's a similar kind of idea you're experiencing in two different kinds of realms, because each one is good for what it does. Neither one of them is good at what the other one is good at, as far as the two different learning places. They're both really good at what they do, and you need all of these opportunities to learn. So when you're in your dreams and scary things happen, and things happen that, nobody listens to you, you're trying to, the house is on fire, you're trying to get everybody out and they ignore you, and you have all these things to do, and the more you try to get it done, the worse it gets, and these frustration dreams and all, those are dreams about your ego. Those are dreams trying to help you deal with your ego. And oftentimes, it's also a way for the consciousness system to test you and see just where you are. Because here, in this physical reality, we tend to act a lot. We don't necessarily are the way we truly are, We do a lot of acting, and we try to be the way we think we ought to be as opposed to the way we really are. In the dream reality, there's no separation between the being level and the intellectual level. It's just the being level. You just react the way you are. So if you want to take a test where you can't cheat, because however you react is really what's inside, then that's going to be your dream reality. So we need that reality. It's very valuable to us, and it's used often just to test and see where we are. Because the system wants us to succeed, because our success is its success. We're consciousness. It's consciousness. As we evolve, it evolves. We're a part of its process of evolution. So it wants us to succeed, and it can help us succeed if it understands where we really are. See? So sometimes you'll go into a dream and just bingo, you're in this situation. It's like somebody threw you into a skit, and here you are, and there's the monster, and there's this, and there's the crying baby, and you got all these things, and you just have to deal with it. And how you deal with it will be what you really are. You'll deal with it in a way that reflects you, not some idea of the way you should be. So we need that sleep. We need that opportunity. We can grow up in that dream reality in ways that we can't grow up here. And it's very helpful to us. And we need it, for our body to, like I say, catch up on garbage collection. And we need the break. That's the other thing. We tend to get ourselves wound up in a whip. We will get ideas, we will get frustrations, and we'll get so wound up with them that really what we need is for somebody to push our reboot button, right? When our iPod gets wound up in a wad like that, it doesn't know what it's doing. It gets stuck right in its program. It just doesn't know what to do next. So, in the computers, you used to get the blue screen of death, right? When your computer just wadded up. And they call it hangs, right? Your system just hung. So what do? You reboot it. Well, that happens to us too. Our system just hangs. Sometimes we get so frustrated, so wound up, so much tunnel vision based on what happened in a day or what happened in that week that we just don't any longer have the ability to think clearly about it. There's nothing like a good night's sleep to reboot the system, and you wake up and everything is different. All those things that you were obsessing over suddenly find perspective after a good night's sleep. So that's a third thing that does. It's kind of a reboot for us. Otherwise, we'd get into these whips with the tunnel vision, and it would be hard to get out of them. It'd be like being in an infinite loop. Just like your computer gets hung, you'd get hung. And the more you think about it, and the more you obsess about it, the worse it would get. And it just gets into a thing. And what you really need is somebody just to knock you over the head and be unconscious for a couple of hours and wake up and see things differently. You just need to break it. You just need a reboot. And we get that out of going to sleep. So every night, we basically get a reboot that lets us see things from a better perspective when we wake up in the morning. So those are really the functions of sleep and why we need it, and why we have to have it. So it's a good thing, though. Getting less and less of it, trying to say, well, I could be more productive if I could just sleep 2 hours a night. Well, you see what you're doing? You're robbing from Peter to pay Paul. You're taking your chance to learn in this reality and stuffing it all into the other. Now you're one-dimensional.
Yes.
You're only in this reality. You're not processing in the dream reality like you should be. You're not resting in the physical place like you should be. Mm-hmm. You're jamming everything into one thing. And why do you want to do that? Because you want to control it. You want to control all of your time. You don't want this wasted time where you're not controlled, doing what you want to do, not manipulating things to be the way you want, not getting the work done. You say you want to manipulate things to get you to where you want to go. You want to get that work done. You want to manipulate yourself to do it. And this going on less and less sleep to make yourself work it's a bad idea fundamentally, because you're depriving yourself of something that's important in order to do something that's probably not so important.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very helpful to hear, I'm sure, for a lot of people to get, again, that broader perspective of where are we at and what is the function of this thing called sleep. Now, one other aspect when it comes to sleep that you talk a lot about, because of the idea of, leaving or going out of body experiences, is lucid dreaming. And for some people, they still feel that maybe dreaming, lucid dreaming, out-of-body experiences, or remote viewing, it's all the same. Now, I know you've got tons of material out there already explaining a lot about each one, but is there anything else that you'd like to include to help people understand with regards to how to better understand these topics?
Sure. The lucid dreaming, remote viewing, out-of-body, all of these things are basically the same thing. They're fundamentally, at the fundamental root, they're the same thing. What the differences are has more to do with you than them. The differences are the way you come to do it. It's kind of your expectations, your beliefs, and your fears. Those are the things that make them very different. When you have a lucid dream, you feel like you're starting from a dream state. Therefore, it has this kind of dreamy quality to begin with. All you're doing is waking up your intent, so your intent now can operate your consciousness, right? You've basically taken your intent and put it in the driver's seat of your consciousness, no different than if you did an out-of-body. But if you do an out-of-body, you see, now you have a belief that you're starting with a body. You're not going to break consciousness at all like you do in a lucid dream, but you're going to leave the body. And what happens? You kind of slip out of a body. You see a bedroom. You see your body laying there. Why do you see that? Because you believe that you're actually getting out of your body. You're not getting out of your body. That's silly. You don't have the spirit that lives inside your body and that slips out at night. That's something that goes back probably, 1,000 years, as far as the belief systems for people go. It has nothing to do with your body. So why do people find themselves in the bedroom, looking back at their bodies? Because that's what they expect. It's just an expectation. It's a belief. That's why they find themselves there. Why do people, when they go out of body, have to fly to get someplace? Because they believe that if you don't travel, you can't get there. Eventually, they learn all you have to do is shift your intent, and it's teleport. You're there. Yeah. That's how you get around in and out of body. You don't have to fly. You don't have to travel. Why do people having NDEs, near-death experiences, go through tunnels? Not because, the larger reality is full of tunnels. It's because they have a sense of going somewhere. It's a sense of not where I am now, but someplace else. And the only way they can interpret that sense is to move, to go from where they are to somewhere else. And the way that you show motion is by something outside of you passing by, you see. So you have a tunnel. So we go through tunnels of light just because that is a metaphor for moving someplace else. And we have this belief system, you see. So we have all these all these belief systems that make it seem to be a very different experience. Sometimes in the early days of out of body, they believed that once you got out of your body, you were tied to your body with a silver cord.
Oh, yes.
And Muldoon and Carrington, Fox, a bunch of them studied that they always had the silver cord attached to them. That's because they believed that the body was primary and the soul was attached to the body again. And if the soul somehow broke loose from the body would die because it was the soul that animated the body, you see. So now the silver cord was like an airline to a deep sea diver. It was the same
Safety
sort of
net,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, it was their safety thing. So now people go out of body. They don't have silver cords. Why? Because they don't have the same belief system. It's no longer necessary because Bob Monroe kind of wrote the book on out of body, and he didn't do silver cords because he didn't come from it from a belief and theory. He just said, here's what happened to me, and silver cords weren't necessary. So it's that sort of thing. So the big differences are the differences that people bring to it, their expectations, beliefs, and fears. Now, people doing out of body have a lot of fear issues. It's the transition from the body to the out of body, and that mainly is a fear thing. They have lots of issues in the transition. So if you do a lucid dream, then there isn't a transition. You're not transitioning from awake to an out state. You just wake up and you're out. No transition. And they sidestep a lot of the fear that the out-of-body people then go through because of their concepts of this transition. Well, if I get out of my body, what if I can't get back? Nobody says, well, what if I can't stop dreaming? That's just not a problem for most people. So there's all these fear issues. And what if I get out of my body and there's some monster lives out there, and they jump me and they get me, or, I get eaten or something happens, and there's all this fear, and they have a whole different set of issues that are kind of out-of-body issues. And then you have remote viewers. Remote viewers just basically move their intent to some place and look around and see what they see. Well, they limit themselves by their expectation to going to a place. Matter of fact, a place somewhere on this globe, in this reality system. They're pretty much limited to that. Now, recently they've broken out of that and they realized, we can go to past and future and, other planets. We can do all kinds of things. It doesn't have to be just in the neighbor's backyard. We can, get around. And they've kind of realized that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that blurs the line then between remote viewing, you see, and out of body and so on. But they don't have to look back and see their body. That's not required.
Yes.
So they don't do that. They just lie there and focus their intent. So they're all really the same thing. There's nothing that different about them at a fundamental level. It's how you get to the state and all the beliefs and fear and expectations that you bring with you. That's the primary difference between, out of body, lucid dreaming, remote viewing.
All of those, yeah.
Yeah, all of those. All they are, here we are, we're virtual. We are in a virtual reality. We get this data stream that creates this reality. You're just switching data stream. You can just do it with your intent. Now, the remote viewer does that with an intent. And in order for the remote viewer to keep his monkey mind out of it, they do things like don't tell him where he's going. They give him a set of coordinates, or there's a location sealed in this envelope that's triple blind. Go to it, whatever it is, and nobody knows what it is either because it was randomly drawn from a group of 1,000, and they're all triple blind. But then he goes to it. He just says, "Well, I want to go see what's at that location." Well, that's all you need. All you need is an address, basically a unique address, and you can go there. So he's just going into the database, extracting data from the database, and then reporting it. No different. Out of bodies working similarly. Yeah. They're going after different kinds of data.
And I think you mentioned in a lot of your, again, videos, which are available for everyone to dive deeper into these topics, that it's just a different point of reference or point of origin that starts the person off on.
Yes. So they're not very different. They're all ways of tapping into a different data stream other than this one, and you can do that just with an intent.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for clarifying on that topic and for all of the wonderful information about health in general and how we can, again, apply the ideas of MBT into our everyday life.